script as a preliminary matter. This is Gary Beller, Chair of the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present, can hear me. Members, when I call your name, well, we all talked already, right? So we had Kathy and Peter and Bill and Don and Peter. So staff, well, no staff, and we don't have any anticipated speakers today. This open, I'm not going to take that call. So. Oops.
Call from a wireless call.
Let me just tell my daughter I get to call her back. Hello, darling. I'm on the Zoom call. I'll call you later. Bye-bye. Okay. Moving along. This meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a public accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting may or may not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Advisory Committee for Non-Voting Taxpayers is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you. If members wish to engage in a conversation, please go through the chair. And for items with public comment, the chair will afford public comment to those if anybody shows up here. And finally, each vote will be conducted by roll call vote, and that's the end of the script. And so we finished that. Oh, Bill Sherman is there. Great, Bill. Nice to have you join us. So the first item is the approval of the agenda. We have a motion on that. Someone? Peter, right? Second. There's a second. All in favor? Let me see your hands. Everybody
All right, this will be the revised agenda.
Right, the revised agenda. Bill Sherman, I assume it's okay with you?
He's on mute. We can't hear him.
Yeah, you might be on mute, Bill, but I'll assume it's okay with you. So the agenda is approved. Then we'll have the minutes, approval of the minutes. Kathy sent out the minutes. These are a little more streamlined. Kathy, thank you. We now are kind of trying to limit our minutes to about 2 pages of minutes for each meeting instead of a verbatim transcript. And so anybody have any comments on this current meeting, current minutes? If not, any comments? No, if not, a motion to approve for someone? Peter, second. Bill, okay. All in favor? Let me see that. Peter, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, we're all in favor. Thank you. So the agenda is approved.
And the minutes.
The minutes are approved. So the next item on the agenda is the discussion of town warrant articles.
You're an angel.
So a lot has happened since our last meeting. None of it particularly good, I might say. I'm trying, my wife said, don't be so down, don't be so down, don't be so down. You know, I was pretty down in the last few weeks about this. So let me just talk about what I think's been going on here. You know, in past years, we really didn't have, in my view, we really didn't have a real good opportunity to influence this whole process of annual town meeting, warrant, you know, articles in the warrant, stuff like that. And the reason that we really didn't have much of an opportunity to participate in that is because we were not meeting off-season, as you recall, but the warrant development was happening off-season. So each year, while we were not having meetings, the steps that were being taken by the town to develop the warrant occurred, and including the annual town meeting and the actual town election. And for the most part, those events occurred while we were not on island. And so our opportunity to participate fully then was quite limited, and we really didn't have much role participating. So with the pandemic, this year was different. That's the good news. This year was different. Unfortunately, the bad news is that the result was exactly the same. So let me talk about why I'm so disappointed. As you know, we all spent a great deal of time dealing with the noise issues, and we talked to Libby about it, and she was helpful enough to say, you know, there's some other complaints as well. Maybe it's time to change that. I'm going to set up a committee. We'd like somebody on your organization to be a member of that committee. And fortunately, Peter Halley agreed to do that. And so Peter joined that committee. And the committee met several times, or a few times anyway. And in the meantime, we, as you recall, came up with our own conclusions and indicated what they were to the select board. And as you recall, our proposal, or at least our recommendations, were to put both construction bans in during the high season, especially on weekends, limit the hours during the week, and also make whatever modifications are necessary to the general noise rules. Unfortunately, our recommendations were not accepted by the select board. And I want you to know that both myself and Peter Halley and I did a lot of work for the committee and for the non-voting taxpayers, because we attended several of these meetings. We certainly attended the select board meeting, and we talked to them about the noise ordinance, and I made my pitch for the construction stuff, and Peter made his pitch for the regular amplified noise, regular issues. The result of all of that was the transfer to this ad hoc committee, and then the committee came up with a number of recommendations which were very, very modest compared to what we were proposing. And eventually, when the select board was considering what the ad hoc committee came up with, and by the way, Peter can talk about this a little bit later, but some of the stuff that happened when he was present at the ad hoc committee meetings was changed, even though it wasn't part of the ad hoc committee meetings when he was present there. Anyway, the select board decided to go along with what the ad hoc committee's final recommendation was. And much to my disappointment, and I guess Peter's and hopefully yours as well, they made very modest recommendations regarding construction noise. And it was just a few hours during the week instead of at night from till 10 o'clock at night. It was only till 5 o'clock, I think they said. 5 PM that had to stop. And then nothing about stopping work on Sundays, even though I made that point to the select board, and nothing about stopping work on holidays like July 4th, even though I made that point to the select board. So they came up with that conclusion, but the worst part was they decided to limit it only to the old historic district. And later on, they changed it to the old historic districts, which is mean just a small little downtown area and the small little Sconset Historic District. I specifically made the point that we initiated this because of the noise complaints of construction on communities all over the island. And I said, don't you think the people in Tom Nevers, the people in Brant Point, the people in Matticat, the people on the cliff, don't you think they deserve the same protection? And the answer was, nobody voted. What happened is Peter and I were at the meeting. It was a select board meeting that ran about 5 hours. We were relegated to the last 45 minutes of the meeting. By that time, Dawn Holgate had already disappeared from the meeting, so there were only 4 people left. And we lost the vote 3-1. Matt Fee actually is the only member of the select board that agreed that it should be brought to a wider group, more protection, even though the protection being provided was very, very modest, just a few hours of extra peace during the high season. But we couldn't get, so we lost that vote 3-1. And when we had another shot at that, Peter and I went to the FinCom meeting. And I'm sorry to tell you that the same result happened at the FinCom meeting. There wasn't, what happened at the FinCom meeting, and I think I mentioned this in my note to you folks, at the FinCom meeting, they all got concerned about the fact that when the final proposal for the change in the article was written, someone in the town administration put in a noise blower ban by 2025. No gas engine blowers permitted after 2025. And so by the time it got to the FinCom, that was part of it was the limited noise bill and this little thing about blowers. And Peter and I watched in amazement that all they talked about was the blower. They never talked for 1 second about, and we made our pitch. I made my pitch. Peter made his pitch. Peter's pitch is that they took out all of the decibel rules so that there is no daytime amplified noise protection on the whole island. Notwithstanding that, and my complaint that no one on other parts of the island were given any protection except for the old historic district during high season. Nevertheless, FinCom voted 5 again, well, 6, whatever it was. We didn't get 1 vote from FinCom, not 1 vote. And I'm sitting there saying, here we are. We're a committee appointed by the town, by the select board, because they want the input from the non-voting taxpayers. We provide the input, the result of which is not very reassuring. So the final FinCom proposal that was approved took out. By the way, what happened at that meeting was the FinCom turned down the noise ordinance. They didn't turn it down because of our complaints, what Peter and I were complaining about. They turned it out because of the blower issue. And the next thing that happened, what also bothers me a bit, is that the FinCom took this matter up again at a meeting a week or so later. As far as I'm concerned, they failed to give proper notice, because I checked all the meeting notices, and they're supposed to say, if we're going to review something, that they're supposed to say that it was on the agenda. But Article 70, our article, was never on the agenda. 71 was, which was a slightly different one. Anyway, they took out the noise blower thing, and then they passed the one that the select board had. So as far as I'm concerned, on that one, we struck out completely. And I'm very disappointed, because we invested a lot of time, the whole board. We talked about it a few times. Peter and I attended all of these meetings on Zoom. We waited and waited till we had our turn. We made our pitches, and I'm still disappointed that we didn't get any result from it. So there is now this warrant article, this article on noise, but it's very modest. They actually cut it back instead of, they gave an hour more for the construction people. So that's the story of the noise ordinance that's in the current warrant. And Peter?
Yeah, if I could add, first of all, Gary, I'm glad to see you decided not to commit suicide last week. I know Gary was really on life support after all of this. But I think there are a couple of things that some background things that you know, it's good that we all know about, and these are my impressions. You know, and I'll bypass the first issue, is that perhaps you had the wrong advocates doing this job for you, but we'll leave that aside. This whole noise ordinance thing, the committee was made up of a landscaper, a contractor, a downtown inn owner, I guess the vice administrator of the planning board, who was the lead person assigned by Libby to get this done. And I think there's one other person, but I'm just blanking on that. And so what you saw is, you know, each one had their own interests. Oh, the last one is sort of a civic guy by the name of Saperstein, who I think is well known in the community. I think he was the first to say this is really not a noise issue, it's a political issue, because what we're talking about here is curtailing somebody's jobs for other people's peace. And then this was going to be a difficult sell at the annual town meeting. The landscaper, very interestingly, he's one of the bigger landscapers in the island, Tom Hanlon, and Tom was in favor of this blower thing because there are electric blowers that are in the market now, and they're going to be in the market strength. The bigger guys like him can afford to buy them, and so you know, that's essentially why there's now a new noise ordinance being considered, because the blower issue turned out not to be the kind of horrible issue that the select board and the FinCom anticipated in terms of pushback. So that's, you have these differing interests, and the one interest that in terms of Gary's major issue, which is getting rid of the weekend noise and getting rid of the later in the afternoon or early evening noise, the one person other than me on the committee that you know, had any interest in that was the downtown inn owner, who, you know, she said, you know, this interferes with my business, basically. And so that's how that modest cutback came into the original proposal. I then suggested, well, if we're talking about downtown, really downtown, the metes and bounds of the historic district are not really downtown anymore. But why don't we think about other small properties? And I suggested up to 20,000 square foot zoning districts have the same benefit. That was too little and too late, or too much and too late, and that never really got considered. And indeed, the way this all came together is we had a bunch of meetings. There was some general understanding, and this looked like it really was not going to go much anywhere at all because of the political issue of noise equals jobs, and that's just difficult to deal with. As it looked like we were going to fail, all of a sudden a redrafted noise ordinance appears on our tables. And sort of, I think the secret hand behind all of this was the assistant chief of police, whose job it is to manage the sound meter. And the police really, you know, he's a thoughtful guy, and they're all these town people, I think, are really, you know, we're lucky to have them. He's a thoughtful guy, but this is noise problems are kind of very low on the list of things they really want to deal with. And then they've got this fussy piece of equipment that has to be calibrated. And apparently he's the only guy who knows how to use it. And so he was very intent on getting the calibration chart out of the existing noise ordinance. And in its place, there is a new standard, which is not too bad, actually. It's basically, and I think there are two standards, and it depends on the time of day and the place you're in. But basically, if you can hear a noise 100 feet from the source, it's too loud. Or in some instances, 50 feet from the source. Obviously, in a 5,000 square foot zoning district, 100 feet is going to be 2 or 3 properties away, which means that the people closest to the noise are going to have a problem. But anyway, that's the standard. But it only applies from 10 in the night to 7 or 7:30 in the morning. Now, there's no daytime standard whatsoever that I could find in it.
None.
So I again wrote another letter, but these are sort of after the fact, too little, too late. And what it all boils down to is there is going to be a noise ordinance on the town meeting agenda. It has some improvements and it has some problems, and it doesn't address the major issue, one of the major issues that we were concerned about. So what do you do about it? And I think this is, it's just something that we could talk at town meeting about. We could suggest an amendment, and I'm trying to understand the amendment process to at least get back in some of the daytime stuff. I frankly think that the night and weekend noise problem is probably a dog that's not going to hunt at the town meeting, and it may be something that we continue on and get better organized on, and at some point in the future go back with it. I just as a on this subject, but a little aside, I attended virtually the select board meeting this week. And at the select board meeting, the noise ordinance came up in an entirely different fashion. And that is, one of the jobs of the select board is to approve permits that violate the noise ordinance. That's the way I would put it. And so this was the meeting at which, the annual permits were being considered of various entities. And the example that I saw and heard about, and it's a real head scratcher, is Bartlett tree specialists. They were in there getting a permit to allow them to do spraying and that kind of stuff outside of the normal hours. For that would, construction and landscaping would be approved in. And one of your neighbors, Gary, spoke at the meeting. Her name is Mary Ferguson, and she lives at 50, I think it's 50 Hulbert Avenue. So it's kind of behind you and
Yeah.
Probably a couple hundred feet away. And Mary comes up and says, the problem is that Bartlett sets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and starts spraying. And this is just, unacceptable. Plus, we're sleeping with our windows open. If they're spraying, we'd like to have our windows closed and and the select board basically goes into, oh, that's a really bad problem, and approves the Bartlett permit. They asked the Bartlett guy, well, is there some reason you need to spray at 9 o'clock in the morning? And he stumbles around and, he doesn't come up with anything that anybody would think, well, this is a reasonable reason other than it's convenient for him to be spraying at 9:30 in the morning, and makes all sort of promises about finding, non-motorized sprayers and this and that and the other thing, and being as quiet and tiptoeing as much as he can do. But there's just no appetite really to interfere with work. And then it came down to, well, have there been a lot of complaints about this? And one of the board members says, no, no complaints. And Mary says, well, I've made a lot of complaints. And they say, and all of a sudden at the meeting, I think Libby called somebody in the police department. You can guess who. And they are able to talk about the noise reports due to Bartlett tree spraying for 5 years, and there've been practically none. And so the lady says, well, there's some apparently mine that haven't been recorded. And I think everybody, we're kind of not a lot of complainers. And so we hesitate to make complaints and only make them when it really is, a big problem. Anyway, my point is that I think noise is a problem. I don't think it's an ACNVT problem. And I'm planning to call Mary to find out, a little bit more. And it's the lesson I think we're learning on this committee this year is just because they don't accept your ideas doesn't mean it's not worthwhile to be out there advocating them, because maybe some jelly will stick to the wall at some point. But secondly, if you look at the group that Kathy is involved in, there may be some of these issues that again aren't just our issues. They're common sense issues for everybody in the town, and maybe we're going to have to either work with other groups or help other groups to form that can carry these things across the goal line at these town meetings. So
Did either of you, I'm sorry, did either of you get any sense that there was any, how should I say this, pushback or feeling that this is coming from the non-voting taxpayers and therefore it's somewhat of a diminished issue? Was there any sense of that? Or
They didn't say that. They didn't say that.
but did you feel? Yeah, I can't imagine it would be direct about it, but I'm curious if there was any feeling about that.
No, they didn't say that. But to me, it is very clear that the biggest concern they seem to have is the economy. And as far as quality of life is concerned, that's not an issue for them. And that's why, even if we're permitted to go to the town meeting and have a representative speak on that, I think there is no chance. If we couldn't get either the FinCom or the Select Board, and we are part of them, we can't, unlike Kathy's other group, they can sue, and I hope they do if something bad happens. We're part of we can't sue ourselves. We're part of the town. We're appointed officials of the town, so we can't do that. And what's happening in this world is that people get so frustrated. The only way to deal with this constant, go hire a lawyer up. Now they're going to the HDC, as you know, everybody's lawyering up because the HDC being unreasonable about solar and stuff like that, right? So you've got to lawyer up. And if we were an independent body, I would have lawyered up long ago and challenged the town on these things, but we can't because we're part of the town. We're actually town officials. We can't sue ourselves. So that's why I think, even though we may have the right to go to the town meeting and speak in favor of changing to the noise thing, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. If we couldn't get the Select Board and the FinCom, I'm really disappointed in the FinCom because not one, and I made the point so clear, don't you think, even if you only have a few hours more peace in the summer, instead of working till 10 o'clock at night, they have to stop at 6 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock for 2 months, right? Don't you think we should extend that to some of the other areas on the island? And not a peep. And you know what's going to happen this summer? Well, last year the brokers sold $1.9 billion, $2 billion worth of deals in 2020, okay? All of that stuff is this summer, as people get ramped up, there'll be reconstruction, there'll be demos, there'll be house moves, and there'll be a lot of complaints, but I guess the economy prevails. And so there's not much we can do about that. Let me mention the second point, which is also why I've been spinning like this for the last month and a half. And that is the other issue of importance that we talked about. And by the way, following your instructions to me, I sent letters to the select board, copying the FinCom, saying we are, we're opposed to the noise ordinance the way it's been presented now because you took out all of our recommendations. And as far as short-term rentals, we are opposed to Act Now's proposal. And we are insulted by the fact that it is extremely divisive because of the discrimination against the non-voting taxpayers versus the residents who do the short-term renting, right? And sadly, when we met with Act Now and we talked about our concern about that, of course, Act Now is not a government body, but as you know, they couldn't have been more, they couldn't have cared less about our concern about this discrimination against non-resident taxpayers. And as you now know, they've just made it worse. Now they've taken all the, they've made it twice as bad for the non-resident short-term renters versus the residents to try to make sure they can try to maybe squeeze out a few votes. But my shock was that when the select board and when the finance committee was talking about the short-term renters and these proposals, which they both voted against, right? I didn't hear one representative of the select board or one representative of the FinCom talk about this discrimination against the non-voting taxpayers who may be short-term renters. So it just drives me cuckoo to think that those two bodies, the select board and the FinCom, are sophisticated enough to know that the sizable amount of economic value brought to the island by the non-voting taxpayers, as you know, 90% of the real estate taxes are paid by us. More than half of total taxes on the island are paid by half of us. And they don't seem at all concerned about the fact that we get the short end of the stick. And maybe that's because we don't have a vote. And at the end of the day, the people who vote are the ones who elect the select board. And I mean, I just don't understand why why no one had some concern with on this other issue with the discrimination against the non-voting taxpayers. Peter, you had a comment?
Well, maybe it's time, maybe it's time that, I got to register to vote up there. You've got to be there, 6 months and a day? Is that I assume it's,
Oh.
No, what is it? What's the register?
I don't think so. I think you can declare that as your primary residence and then
Oh, yeah.
undeclare it.
Oh, I don't, to vote, really?
Yeah, as long as you're not voting in two places at the same time. So for example, if there's no, you can say, I'm now going to be a resident here, and then you change your mind in the fall when you go home again. I mean, it's not cool to do that, but you
But you have
can't.
to have
The only
proof of
thing that's illegal is you can't be registered. You can't go vote in your local election at home at the same time, you're registered on Nantucket.
Well, I wasn't even thinking of that as vis-a-vis the town meeting, but I was sort of thinking about it as, many of us now, I'm not included yet, but, stay on Nantucket, 6 months and a day. And, and it may be, tax advisable to actually, hard to believe, but tax advisable to declare Massachusetts as your residency.
It's Taxachusetts.
Yeah, it's compared to some states. So, we could declare, we could run for select board. I mean, what's the stop? What's the stop? I just mean you have to be there 365 days a year to be a selectman, doesn't? I assume it means you have to be there 181 days. I don't know. I mean, it's just something to think about in the big picture.
Yeah, it's, the law is different in different jurisdictions. And if you're applying DC is just an unusual situation. And that is primarily because the DC can't tax you if you've not been here 161 days.
Right.
And that's that. Other places can. but in different ways or any way they want to, as long as it's not discriminatory.
Well, I guess,
Gary?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kathy,
But just a couple things. I think I think it's very, very interesting. I think we've all learned a lot about how the town government actually works. So this is perhaps a failed experiment, but I think we learned, okay, so that's what the town really cares about. Maybe they can't say anything about discriminatory practices against non-voting taxpayers because they already do it by giving residents a break on their taxes. So they're already discriminating against us. So it's pretty hard for them to, take sides like that or things like that. But I think you're right. The constituents are, and as we've learned a lot on the Nantucket Together group, on who the constituents are and who has a voice and who doesn't. I mean, it's politics. It's never going to be fair, right? So I think you're right, Peter, when you said, maybe other groups reaching out and aligning yourselves with the people that you need to align with to get a voice is a way to do it. It takes a lot longer. It's a lot more work. But like you said, one of the things that we did was we put out strategic growth initiatives, which basically noise is one of the issues on there that we want to address and address it in a broad island perspective. So it's people who live there as well as people who don't live there full time. So maybe that is a way to to reach out and get alignment. Just throwing that out there. So, and we also learned about how the process works in all the committees, right, Gary? By attending and being participating. You don't like it, but at least we're not so green in going in there. Pardon me, Don, for using your name, but
I guess we should feel good about the fact that our voices were heard, even though our recommendations were not followed. But it's frustrating to me because we spent a lot of time thinking this thing through, and the results this year, at least, did not bear any fruit. What I hope happens, I sit here thinking deviously. During the course of the summer, lots of the community organizations have meetings, and they ask to have officials from the town to speak at those meetings. So I'm secretly sitting here saying, I can't wait to find out when each member of the select board is going to be speaking at either the Tom Nevers Association or Brant Point or Cliff or whatever the association is, because I want to find somebody in that group who's a local resident and say, tell us again why you didn't think we were entitled to the same courtesy for nighttime noise protection or construction noise protection that you gave to the old historic district. Tell us why our community isn't entitled to a little bit of relief, just a few hours relief in the high season. I want someone to ask that question. But that's unfortunately the way the world is these days.
Yeah. Well, I think that we are doing a terrific job. We can pat ourselves on the back. We are giving the select board the best advice that we can give them. And whether or not they take it is up to them. It may be, thinking about the elected officials talking to organizations, that we usually had one select board member a year come and speak with us. And I think Matt Fee is the one that was there more often in my recollection than others. But it may be that one of the things that we should be doing is going for maybe 2 a year. And again, not making this a hostile environment for them, because that's not the purpose, but rather to have basically I was going to say 1-on-1, but it could be 7-on-1 meeting, just to discuss those things that are of interest to them, and ask them their views. Like, if what can we do about this noise, because it affects more than just us, it's the typical lobbying stuff. You gotta, see people, you gotta shake their hands if that's ever allowed again, and so on and so forth.
When I see what's going on with the Sconset Bluff, I mean, it's nothing but litigation for years. It's the same kind of a thing, people just lawyer up. And now I think that the short-term rental proposal should die on the vine because it's a stupid proposal, had nothing to do with affordable housing. It's discriminatory against half of the population, and it's also very harmful for the economy as a whole. But if perchance, if by some miracle it got through, then I would hope Kathy's group would start litigation against it because it's outrageous, outrageous. And I don't think that kind of discrimination should be, is legal. Yes, Bill?
Gary, early on in our discussions, you were raging on about town meeting and how a handful of dedicated, devoted citizens could override what the select board had recommended on a particular article. And it seems to me that could happen here. Tobias Glidden has been a selectman. He's got a lot of votes in this town. It's an old community family. And, you know, he gives enough old ladies rides to the town meeting. You know, he could carry the day on that issue, stupid as it is.
He could, but because the real estate industry will die if short-term rentals are limited, I don't think it's gonna, you know, the whole real estate industry will be rocked by something like that. And that is the driver. That's the driver of the economy of Nantucket. I think we all know that living here now, that's what is the engine that keeps Nantucket.
So is there a real estate association, realtors association now? Because maybe that's, we should have somebody from them come visit us once a year, and we can, because this noise issue should be a big issue for the real estate industry as well.
Well, I mean, and people who live in the neighborhoods, it's year-round people, they can't like the noise either. I mean, I think there's a common ground.
Maybe each neighbor, maybe we can reach out. And I mean, we're talking about full-time job here, right? Reaching out to the neighborhood associations on this issue. Just not, you know, I think in a generalized way, to find out who really likes to have lots of noise around wherever they're living, you know, when it would be nicer not to have less noise.
Well, maybe the simple answer is, I suspect all the selectmen don't live in the historic district. So you launch a protest after hours, make a lot of noise in front of their house. And you make it clear that this is the noise issue. But you know, there are many ways. But bottom line is, you know, it is an economic issue, it seems to me. And unless you're able to load up at the town meeting, this is a very much of an uphill fight on so many.
Yeah, and it was an economic issue that comes up in a particularly difficult year. Yeah, great for real estate sales, but the construction trades were out of business for 3 months or something like that, and on and off and on and off. And so in a way, one might have, you know, commiserate with them and say, well, this year in particular, you needed all those extra hours at these odd times to get the normal amount of work done.
You know, very often my wife and I, certainly my wife, likes to watch the HDC meetings. And I can tell you that the amount of development that is occurring and going to occur, you should see the agendas. If you looked at the agendas for the last 3 months, the HDC, those poor folks, I don't think they get paid. Well, maybe they get paid $5,000 or something a year or something, right? It's unbelievable. They meet once or twice a week for 4 or 5 hours. They have 87 different projects to approve, the demos and the renovations, changes of doors and changes of windows and putting, you know, widow walks on and stuff. I mean, the amount of activity that is going on, and when I see those kind of agendas, when I see that many items on the agenda, each meeting of the HDC, I realize that all of that turns into construction for the next 12 months. You try to get a contractor these days, forget about it. It's really, really very difficult to find tradespeople to work on projects, People, I know that people in Brant Point and Hulbert who can afford it have a 1 or 2 year waiting list to have their houses lifted 6 feet. They know they have to lift it. Even the $23 million house that was sold, that was renovated, that used to belong to the Secretary of State, right?
Yeah.
That they renovated the house. They spent about $8 million to renovate a house they bought for $17 million, and they wanted to raise it at the time. And Costello said they couldn't do it for 2 years. They were going to pay over $1 million to raise the house. They couldn't wait 2 years, so they renovated the house anyway. And maybe someday they'll raise it.
Well, I'll tell you what, next year we put in a citizens warrant to make it, you have to use a rake for your leaves, right? Maybe then we'll get a compromise.
So
Rake and a broom.
So one of the questions we need to think about is, notwithstanding my comments, I apologize for being a little bit negative, but I'm glad that I'm glad we can think about it as just a step on the way to having a more successful impact in the future. Because we probably, we shouldn't stop trying. My initial reaction, of course, when I first read about some of these conclusions and the select board especially, I said, maybe we should just all resign and just say, if you're not going to take our recommendations, why do you want us to be a committee that is here is a committee that is appointed by you to advise you of issues of concern to the non-voting taxpayers, and we give you our recommendations and you reject them all. So maybe you don't really need us. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking about that because, as Peter said, this is maybe a tougher year to get a lot of changes done after the pandemic. And maybe there'll be more receptivity when people are feeling a little more comfortable that the economy is not crashing around them because of the pandemic and stuff. But it does raise the question as to, with respect to those items, whether it makes sense for us to find someone. It probably won't be me because I'm not even sure I'll be on island when the meeting ATM takes place. Whether somebody wants to speak at the annual town meeting on behalf of the non-voting taxpayers on these issues or any of the other issues. The other issues that are, as you know, are the most controversial are the funding of the affordable housing issues. And as you know, there's several proposals. The two biggest ones are Arthur Reed has this proposal to take a portion of the special taxes that are generated by short-term rentals and dedicate them solely to affordable housing. The other proposal, which is equally controversial, is to take 25% of the land bank's earnings, the 2%, and use that for affordable housing. We have not had those people before us, but in thinking about it, the meetings that they have had on those subjects with the select board and the FinCom are very instructive. And it just seems to me that for us to try to replicate that is probably not worthwhile. I think that if we wanted to get involved on those issues, looking at the meetings at which both sides appeared before the FinCom would be a good way for us to understand all of those issues, rather than trying to have them come before us and do the same thing, since our votes don't count at all and FinCom does, and the select board does. But so those are the only other issues. And Kathy, I don't think that the noise blower issue is something that, we would necessarily care to get involved in.
I found that it was interesting that was an Act Now citizens warrant from last year. There was actually an article just on the leaf blowers. And I just found it interesting that they stuck it into the noise bylaw and then took it back out again. It's already a separate article
Right.
on its own. I don't know why they did that, but but yeah, I think as far as having somebody speak, I think that any number of people can speak as long as the moderator is given the names in advance. Sarah Alger has to have an advance, and then she can recognize people. In other words, what do you want to talk about, and where are you from? And then she will, that's what I'm told she will do. So it doesn't have to be just one person. It can be more than one. You have to sit in a separate area.
Yep.
So,
Peter?
With a face mask, presumably.
yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a bad scene anyway. A bunch of people sitting, standing around a schoolyard, a parking lot is what we're having the meeting in, the parking lot, I think. So I'm not sure that's a good venue, but unfortunately, because of the controversy on some of these issues, people may show up. So it is, as Bill Gardner was saying, there's a little bit of a danger there that the wrong people show up, which is why another one of our non-successes, I won't call them failures, I'll call them non-successes, is to get the Town Government Study Committee to think about the change of how voting occurs, on the island of Nantucket. And we had a good meeting with John Brescher, and we've heard all the details, but the Town Government Study Committee, I saw another report. I'm on this other committee, as you know, and as a result of that, I got to see a report that talks about something going on in the next few weeks with the select board. And they were talking about whether they should continue some of these committees going in the future. They weren't talking about us at all. There's no question about that. But they were talking about the Town Government Study Committee. And one of the reports suggested that in theory, the Town Government Study Committee was only supposed to be in existence for 1 year or 2 years. It's now been about 4 years. And this report suggested that at the next select board meeting, they're talking about getting the final report from the Town Government Study Committee, which is making no recommendations on change of anything. And that'll be the end of the Town Government Study Committee unless they decide to extend it until another few years. So, but the bottom line is that there is no recommendation coming out of the Town Government Study Committee about the change of form of voting or government in Nantucket. So,
Gary,
yes.
I think I would support the idea that we have someone there. It's easy for me to say because I won't be on island until shortly after the meeting ends. I expect, because I think, what is it, June 5th? Is that the date of the meeting?
Yes, June 5th is the meeting.
Yeah, I arrive on a late ferry that day.
Mhm.
Well, you know what? It might be, it might take several days.
Yeah, but I do think, just to maintain our own sort of credibility and exposure on key. I mean, we shouldn't be obviously speaking on every issue. There's, but those that we've invested our time and effort in, even if they're losers, I think we ought to at least express what our position has been, what we've said, and be on the record. And I think it has a lot of benefits to that. It may embarrass. It makes a record. It makes a record. But
I think also you can, at the town meeting on, because amendments can be made, we could suggest that they extend that restriction to the entire island.
No, I don't understand that, Kathy. One thing that I would like to understand, maybe in the next few weeks, we can get some advice on that. I would like to understand who it is, how a person, and which person is able to recommend an amendment to an existing warrant article. Is it any member of the public? In other words, could we get, first of all, it can't be a non-voting taxpayer. If we're not a resident, I'm sure we cannot make a recommendation for an amendment. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that the most we're allowed to do is speak, but I doubt whether we're able.
I think we can speak, and we'd have to have somebody who is a resident
Yes,
aligned with us to make that motion or make that amendment.
right. And the question is, if we find someone who's a resident that's willing to make that recommendation, are they permitted to make a recommendation on somebody else's article?
Yes. The author has to accept that as a change, but this one was, this noise bylaw is a town one, isn't it?
It's a select board
Yeah.
bylaw, and so I've already made, I can't remember what I wrote, but I sent it to Gary and
Yes.
Kathy, and I think in that letter I suggested to, and the recipient was the main recipient I was writing the letter to with members of the committee, and I'm just blanking on the name right now, but
Leslie.
Excuse me?
Leslie.
Leslie Snell, yeah, who is on a town employee who's like, I guess, the assistant administrator of the planning board. And I, suggested whether there should be an amendment to handle daytime noise, and I gave language, which, frankly, I think is too broad, but you got to start someplace. So you have her, and then I don't know whether there's, what is this one? Are we Article 70, and then there's
Yes,
71?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so there's 71, which is kind of duplicative. I don't know whether that's still going to be on there, but maybe we could talk to that person and through Article 71, get something passed that would affect Article 70 if it passes.
The guy from Article 71, I watched all of his comments at these meetings. He's only interested in these compressor noises, he's not really interested in any of the other stuff, and I doubt if he'd be.
But I think it might be
positive.
worth just asking him or talking to him. I'm happy to figure out who he is and give him a call, because this is, the compressors make noise day and night, and his issue is, I think his property is what, next to the old Island Home or something?
Yes,
And,
yes.
and the air conditioning equipment there is very noisy and drives him
The
nuts.
issue.
Yeah. But it's noise. He understands the issue. That's clear.
Yeah.
So he might be a candidate, somebody who's interested in noise, not precisely what we're talking about, but might be worth it. At least we can identify some person that might be worth asking.
Yeah. So the question is, we have a few of you here. Are any of you anxious or willing? Forget the anxious. Are any of you willing to go to the town meeting and speak on our behalf? Kathy, I think that although you're likely to go to the meeting, I don't think you would be permitted to speak on our behalf on the short-term rental issue. I think that you would be in violation of your conflict of interest rules if you have a personal interest in the result. So.
Yeah,
And
I actually have my house rented that weekend, so unless I find some other place to stay, which I'd be happy to go, I'm thinking about going and staying with friends so I could be there. I right now don't have any plans to be at the meeting, so.
But you couldn't, when I looked at the conflict of interest rules, since you
Yeah.
have a financial interest in that particular article.
Right.
So it just so happened that that's the meeting that you were not on the call when we voted to vote against the short-term rental. So you didn't have to recuse yourself since you weren't at the meeting, but
Right.
we certainly feel it's a bad suggestion, that whole act now thing.
Well, by the way, just so you know, for the Time Never Civic Association, we ran a poll of our
Right.
neighborhood on all of those articles, not all of them, but the ones that are of interest. And the short-term rental one was thumbs down by about 75% of the people. About 12% said, well, if it was amended in some way, they might support it. And then only about the rest were supporting it. So it doesn't have of course, I don't know how many people vote that responded to that poll, but it's, at least in that neighborhood, it's not a big winner.
Kathy, is there anyone from the Tom Nevers Association who you think might be willing to speak to extend the proposed noise ordinance to other communities on the island, except, which is now limited to the 8 historic districts?
Possibly, I mean, the president
protect-
is
that
a
would
year-round
protect the
resident. I don't know if he'll be at the meeting, but yeah, I mean, there's noise issues in Tom Nevers from the park.
Okay.
And that's not construction, but, being out where we are, it's so open.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, someone who lives 5 houses away, you can hear what they're saying when they're on their deck. So the noise does carry out there. So probably they would, yeah.
I think we also have an issue where we've given our input to the select board, and how seemly or unseemly is it that we as members of the committee or the committee speak against a select board proposal? It seems to me we'd almost have to do it as.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just this odd sort of situation we're in.
yes, I agree. That's to my point why we couldn't litigate against them, because
Yeah.
we are part of them. We're town officials who can't, unless we want to be whistleblowers, we can't speak up.
Yeah.
You might be right about that, Peter. You might be right.
I don't
about
know. I don't know. We are an advisory board. This is the fact that they haven't taken our advice I don't think doesn't rule out our expressing it to the community when they vote. I mean that would mean that we would have to support every town select position. I didn't sign up for that. I don't think any of us did. So I don't know. It's not going to come down to that. I don't think it will come down to that, but I think that's
Yeah. Well,
it.
if it's permissible, and that's different if it's advisable, but if it's permissible, I do think that we ought to speak on those things in which we've adopted a position. And then the next question, in addition to who would be doing it, I do think that we would want to make sure that the message that is given is comfortable for the people on the committee.
Sure.
And I think it needs to be sort of, we need to give our message, but it also has to have some sort of positive aspect to it, so that, we're not the terrible two committee. So there would need to be work done. So I think it's something we should consider in it's April, May, June. So we have what, 2 months or something before May?
Yep.
Yeah, just a little under 2 months to figure this out, which probably needs, we have to have a meeting that considers what, who, when, where, and why.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be up right after the town meeting, and I just don't know that I can be up there that early, but it's a possibility. I know a very well-respected trial lawyer who's a member of this committee who will likely be up there and has the last name that is like a Nantucket last name.
He's gonna
But I
be-
don't know if his heart would be in it.
He's got a wedding in Washington on Saturday, June 5th.
You're abandoning your post and leaving for Washington? Oh, you have a wedding. You're not getting married, are you?
No, I'm already married.
Well, then you don't have to be there. But
It's a real wedding, not a Zoom wedding?
No, it's in Annapolis, Maryland. I would love to go to a town meeting, but I just can't.
yeah. Now that you mentioned, I may have a wedding at that point too. And I'm not being facetious about this. I have to check.
It's the same wedding.
I I actually don't know where ours is, but I know it's a Greek wedding. Is yours a Greek wedding?
No,
Oh, okay.
Well, there'll be a lot of people at the town meeting based on probably on the affordable housing issue, right? The land bank people, right? The Affordable Housing Trust people. So it might be a wild and woolly scene. I'm
Yeah.
not, well, I doubt if I'll be on island by then, but.
Yeah, but I guess the point is that while we're all exhibiting our chicken feathers here and our travel plans, whether or not one of us appears at that town meeting, we have positions and we can ask, the moderator or whoever to express them.
I thought of that myself. I thought that perhaps the easy way to deal with this is to just say to the moderator, while you're in the process of introducing these resolutions, would you mind including in that a brief mention of the position taken by our committee?
Give her a script. Give her a script. I mean, give her if she'll read it.
To the extent that we take positions, we might only be taking positions on 5 articles, right? And the question is, if we said we are opposed to A, B, and C, and we are in favor of D and E, would the moderator be willing to do that? And would we need to say more than just opposed or in favor of it? And of course, as Peter suggested, should we be doing that if we're a function of the select board, and one of our recommendations is to recommend against the select board's proposal? I don't know if that's a right.
Well, really, what we're doing, it sounds like it's just recommending that an additional piece be put back in. We're not saying we're against it. Right?
That might be that might be a good solution.
Be positive.
We're not opposing it. We're just we're recommending an amendment to it.
Yeah, it's so good it should apply to the entire island.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. What a great idea. What a great idea. You can be real heroes.
Is
Why
any
the
of
select board didn't understand that when we made that pitch, I don't know.
any of the annual meeting going to be on Zoom? I mean, is it only in person? I mean, it's kind of ironic that everything's been on Zoom this year, but now all of a sudden the town meeting is going to be in person
Right now, they're planning to do it in person.
with no Zoom capacity. No,
No,
interesting.
I haven't seen that yet. And as I say, they're doing it in the parking lot. They're afraid to do it inside the auditorium.
It is going to be a circus.
So it's going to be a circus, yes.
It'd just be fun to watch just for that reason alone.
Yeah, I mean, plus the island is one of the hottest spots in the
Yeah.
country right now.
Right.
So they may need to modify.
Like Roberto may change all of that.
Well, in fact, if they have it in the high school parking lot, at least they're close to the hospital.
Okay,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that'll be what they do. They'll shift it to the hospital parking lot, and that'll be the compromise.
That's right. There's a lot of
Get your test while you vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. So the question is, with respect to, so we know how we feel about the two articles that I've already written to the select board about, the noise and the short-term rental. Do you think we should try to come up with a position on the other ones? As I say, they're very complicated, and my best advice, maybe we should do this. Kathy can send out a notice to us as to when those debates occurred. There were good debates that occurred with both sides on the land bank issue and on the Arthur Reed issue. There were debates at either the select board or the FinCom. And if she sent that information to us, and we would have the opportunity, to review that sometime between now and our next meeting on May 8th. And then based on what we see on those, to see whether we think we should be taking a position on that. What do you think about that?
So,
Peter?
yeah, this is all about money. Those two articles are just about money,
Right,
and who controls the money. They're virtually two peas in a pod. Arthur reads, there's this new source of revenue, I guess, that comes up from this law that allows
Yes.
Act Now to, suggest the short-term rental situation. That's part of that law, I believe. But so Arthur Reed says, well, there should be a permanent division of that money, which, X percent goes to finance. Somebody else says, well, we've already got this revenue that goes to the
it's used for town purposes.
yeah. And so the select board would naturally be against earmarking a portion of that for, short-term rentals. It's out of their control. And oh, by the way, they can't use it to shore up the budget. I think that maybe we should take a position, and I'd suggest it's this. We are for a permanent source of funding for short-term rentals. And we're agnostic as to whether it's Article 38 or, and this may be a step too far, or whether it's comes out of the conservation fund or whatever it is, because maybe we're not agnostic about that. But it's just, I think it's maybe that simple, or just we're in favor of funding for short-term rentals, period.
You mean affordable housing?
For affordable housing, yes, I'm sorry. Well, we're in favor of both, aren't we? Yeah.
In what context would we be saying that?
Well,
In other
it
words, yes,
would just be our advice to the
to who?
to the select board. I mean, that's the only thing we're supposed to be doing is advising the select board, right?
Right, yep.
And so in a way, I guess what we'd be saying is really an Article 38 kind of an issue, because the select board is against earmarking a portion of the of that source of funds for short-term rentals, because they want to be in the position of basically, I guess, figuring out where that money should go every year. You've got a good point, Gary. Who would we be saying it to? But do we have something to say that basically is like embracing the flag, but otherwise not being very helpful?
Yeah. I mean, we are for affordable housing, and we're glad that the trust has done something already. It's started to figure out how to do stuff, and I'm glad they're doing that. And the town meeting a few years ago approved $20 million. To me, the only question is, do you want to make it, whether it should be a permanent source of financing, or whether you should, what they did in one city, I forget if it's either Austin or Houston, Texas, or Austin, Texas. They went out and they did a $500 million municipal bond issue for affordable housing. And so they did this, money rates are low. So they went out and they issued bond, $500 million. And now they have plenty of money to build affordable housing for several years, at least. And they're paying it off over time, with the benefit of the low interest rates. Maybe that's something Nantucket ought to do instead of trying to take it out of the taxes or the land bank, or, it might affect our AAA rating by borrowing. We wouldn't need 500 million, but maybe we need 100 million.
Gary, doesn't the land bank already do something like that? Leverage their contributions? I'm not sure if it's a bond, but they do it in some way.
They have done some borrowing. The land bank has done some borrowing, but not for affordable housing. And I'm not even sure if, Brookmore's suggestion is even legal. In fact, I think it's not. I think what Brookmore knows, the woman who proposed this, is that if the town meeting agreed to take a quarter of 25% of the land bank's annual 2% revenues, that they couldn't use it for affordable housing unless the Massachusetts legislature adopted an amendment to the existing protocols, because it's not currently. Now, she has said, Brooke is quoted in the Inky as saying, I've already talked to people, in the state capitol, and they think there's a good chance of that kind of an amendment being successful, but not a guarantee. So that even if the town approved using 25% of the land bank revenues, it wouldn't automatically be done. It would have to pass through the Massachusetts legislature and get approved as well.
Gary, if we support affordable housing in a general way, I think that's a good idea. But I sure hope our committee is not going to support diverting land bank revenues.
No,
I think a lot of good reasons to oppose that.
yep,
I think what Peter was saying is that it does need some sort of permanent source of income to keep money flowing in. I think that the short-term rental, and let's say you were to pick that one, I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but that would provide a certain amount of targeted money. And it would also assist them in creating the bond, to create a bond if they wanted it to float a bond. Having a permanent source of income that you've said is going to feed that would be a way to not impact the bond rating. So I think, having a permanent source of income for the Affordable Housing Trust is really what that needs to happen, like Peter said, and we don't really care where it comes from. Well, maybe we do care. We don't want it to come from here or here, but it needs to come from somewhere.
We're happy if it comes from a percentage of the tax revenue, but not land bank.
Well, that's Article 38, or at least that's a source of, I guess the town's position is they can look at their finances every year and decide how much of their annual
yeah.
revenue they want to devote toward affordable
I mean,
housing.
it's brand new money. About $9 million it will be for the town out of heaven. It dropped out of nowhere for 2020. So they want to have it.
Yeah.
They want to control where it goes, for sure.
Yeah.
But is there a consensus on this, or, I mean, if there's no consensus, we just pass by and.
Yeah, I'm not sure we should try to figure out how they should do this funding. We think affordable housing is good, and we think they ought to come up with some creative solutions. But, some of us, a lot of people feel it shouldn't come out of the land bank, and many people feel you shouldn't tell the town how to spend the excess money now they're getting from the short-term rental tax. Kathy, the short-term rental tax legislation allowed 2 or 3 different special taxes. Is the town collecting all of those now on short-term rentals?
There's another one they could collect,
Yes,
which is an impact.
Yep.
I think that's another 2 or 3%.
Yes.
They could opt in, and that really would be, that's intended for, infrastructure, things like sewers and landfill and things like that, that basically the impact of having short-term rentals on your community means you need more infrastructure, therefore you can spend money on that. So that they could implement that, and again, that would be paid for by the visitors. It would be paid for by the people who rent, and making the price higher.
They can collect 3% more on that, I think. So,
Yes.
and they haven't chosen to do that yet.
No. They're aware of it, but only recently aware of it. They were not aware of it. Our Nantucket Together group told them about it. They were like, really? So I don't know, they may do something next year or decide to, but that's not anywhere on any of the things I've seen in the warrant to do that. I don't know if they need to go to town meeting or they can just do it. But
Okay, well. So our next meeting is scheduled for May 8th.
Yeah.
And maybe between now and then, we can think about how, if at all, we should have someone appear, or whether our positions are properly notified to the town meeting. You know, it's,
Well, I can send out the links to the YouTube and I can ask
you know,
exactly how the protocol works with the moderator.
yeah,
How about having the vice chair circulate a draft memorandum of our position on those issues?
Hmm.
He's already done a lot of the.
And so those issues would basically are noise and short-term rentals. Is that right?
Yeah,
I can try to do that, and I need to do it like a week or enough before the 8th so that it can go into the notice and everybody can get a copy of it.
we've already taken the position on those two.
Yeah.
And I've
You
sent
want to
that,
include affordable housing.
there's a letter that's already went to the select board on our behalf from me.
repetition.
Saying we are opposed to the current article on the noise ordinance, and we're opposed to the current article on the short-term rental. So we've taken that position officially and communicated that to the select board.
Yeah, but haven't the articles changed at all since that letter was written? They changed slightly, didn't they?
The
noise
short-term
ordinance.
rental one became worse,
Yeah, well,
and
yeah, so I think my point only being that it's probably worth at the May 8th meeting, recertifying our position with regard to the new,
yeah.
to the latest.
Yeah.
That's
I
okay.
will not be, I cannot be, unfortunately, I've got another commitment on the morning of May 8th, so I will have to pass on that meeting. I'm having to give my proxy if it's valid.
So I'm thinking that maybe just an outline
Mhm.
of those two issues, and on the, I frankly don't know exactly where the short-term rental stands now, because last time I tuned in, it was kind of a moving target where it looked like the proponents act now we're gonna spring something at the town meeting.
They've published it.
They
Yeah,
published it.
Yeah, they basically have removed all the restrictions on year-round residents.
Okay, that one I think I've seen, which is basically just makes it more discriminatory than it was before. And they're trying to, because it was very effective year-round resident opposition up until that.
There's still a fair amount of it because people realize where their money comes from and where their
Yeah.
income comes from.
Yeah,
Um,
so maybe it'd be helpful. I can do something on the noise, and maybe somebody could at least feed me some stuff on the short-term rental. I mean, on short-term rental, it's basically just opposition. There's no there's no proposal that we would think is a good proposal that would modify, create some short-term rental rules. Is that right at this point?
Right.
And whereas for the noise, we don't like it in its current form, but we think it could be improved by doing X and Y, is what I think I'm hearing. And X might be backing off from our original hours for the summer, but in just saying, extending the historic district rules to the entire island, which would be, I think that's sort of a nifty play, because it gets things very, very modestly headed in the right direction. And then why it has something to do with making sure that there are daytime noise rules and regulations that can be enforced if necessary. Is that kind of it?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And on affordable housing, I don't know what to recommend to you.
Say, an independent or a permanent source of funding. We support it, some sort of definition of permanent sort of funding and not specify what.
Yeah. Maybe reliable. I never like the word permanent when it comes to any taxation.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and I know that was my word before, but reliable.
Reliable, good.
Yeah.
Well, or do we want to just kick the can a little bit down the road here? And because I thought the whole idea here was that there was going to be further, further study coming out of this, that there was really going to be a focused, some committee that was going to, on committee, whatever, that was going to,
What?
on affordable housing.
No.
No?
Well, let's.
The
Kathy,
Affordable Housing Trust and all the other organizations, I think what they have done, is they've figured out how to implement what's needed for safe harbor, so that the town has the requisite number of 10% of the housing is affordable.
Right.
So they've defined what they can do. They have lots of choices, but they just need the money now. And so that was, that's the thing that hasn't been decided. Is where's the money come from to do that?
Yeah, well, we haven't even started with that. I'm not sure I'm prepared to tell you where, to say where it should come from.
No.
We need that's something we need to talk about. There.
Right.
So I don't think we can, I don't think we're in a position to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Not even to say that they just need it. They need permanent fund. They need a reliable source of funding.
Well, for motherhood and apple pie, it's,
Yeah. We can encourage the town to come up with a source of reliable funding.
which is what it's.
And you're looking at reliable funding here, right?
Yeah, of course. That's
Because in the void of not doing that is the reason that these citizens articles have come out, because nobody has to find that. So
Yeah,
people are just making stuff up.
Yeah, but by supporting reliable source of funding, it could be the non-voting taxpayers. I'd rather support a specific proposal than to give them, words that we could come back to haunt us.
And we say none of the proposals on the table work, or
Well, I don't think we've taken have we taken a position on have we taken a position on affordable housing in the past?
No.
No.
We've been educating ourselves.
Right.
So maybe we're just silent and we focus on these two things, unless taking a position helps something else.
I have two other things to talk to you folks about. The first one is, the second one is actually just in terms of, if our next meeting is the May 8th, although Peter can't be there, maybe we should change it to the 15th. But the question is, if we meet, whether it's the 8th or the 15th or something like that, the ATM is on June 5th. And the question is, when should we think about having a June meeting? Should it be after?
See what the damage is. Yeah.
Yeah. The first Saturday in June is the 5th.
Yeah, make it the 12th.
So, and if that's the 12th, I think the town meeting is the election is what, the 15th?
Oh, yes.
The election is the 15th.
Mhm.
So maybe the 19th is I wonder, should we, I'm just working backwards. Should we wait till after the town meeting and the election before we have our next meeting in June? And if so, and if that means we will meet until the 19th, does that mean we should change the meeting of the May from 8 to 15 or 22?
In June, I think that June 12th is not a good date for me.
The
But
19th is better.
the following week would be better.
Okay.
And it's certainly, if the town election is the 15th, which I think it is,
Yeah.
then we should meet on the 19th. And then the only question is, in May, do you want to meet on the 8th or the 15th? Or maybe we should move that to the 15th anyway, since Peter has a conflict then.
Yeah, that's a month apart. Yeah, that sounds, it's fine for me. If it works for others.
Okay, Kathy, let's do that. Make the May meeting the 15th and the June meeting the 19th. And in the interim between now and the May meeting, we'll learn a little bit more about affordable housing, but we probably won't be taking a position on that. The other item that I wanted to spend a minute with you guys on is that Peter Halley has been working very hard coming up with a way to change the laws of Massachusetts. And he has a proposal
Yeah.
that he sent around, which allowed us to meet year-round electronically. And Peter sent a note to Kathy and I and to Bill, and it's basically a proposal that would change Massachusetts laws to allow committees like ours to meet. And the question is, with his drafting, he's done very specific drafting about changes to the laws in Massachusetts. And he's done that thoroughly and carefully. The question is, how do we get that moving? Do we talk to the representatives ourselves? Do we talk to the select board? The select board can't change that. The Massachusetts legislature has. I'm not sure we should be recommending a change to the laws of Massachusetts without telling our owners, the select board, that we think this makes sense. We've sent a note to Erica already. Peter and Kathy, we sent a note to Erica Mooney already saying we'd like to get the laws changed so we can meet year-round electronically, but I don't think we're going to get any changes done by just sending a note to Erica. Peter has yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Bill Sherman made a suggestion which I would like to follow up on, and that is he gave me contact information about reaching out to a similar community on the Cape, which has and see what they're doing and what they're thinking, and maybe we would have a possible coalition of similar committees in other places in Massachusetts who might be thinking the same thing is a good idea, and checking with them. I do think that this is not something we should be doing on our own, leaving aside other communities, but this is something that the town has to support. I did not send the draft to town. I just sent the draft to all of you because I didn't want to get ahead of all of you with this. But the next person would be Erica Mooney and Libby, probably, just to get their input. This is, this is either pie in the sky because these committees just are not all that important in the great scheme of things, or it's something that perhaps other committees are going to want to latch on to too, and make it even broader. So we're in a sort of tectonic change in how people meet and get together. But I think for this meeting, just to make sure that this is something this committee wants, and it wants to move forward on it.
And we all agree with that, right? I certainly think that it would make sense that we can meet electronically even after pandemic is over, so that we can add, there might be some additional members that we can add who know they can't be here fully throughout the summer, but would like to participate and have interest in Nantucket in their heart. So I think that would be a good thing. And I think, Peter, you ought to check with the Chatham people, see if they have ideas how to move this forward.
Yeah.
Well,
They have the same representatives that we do, right?
yep, I think so. Kate,
And I imagine there are other communities in Massachusetts that have these kinds of advisory committees as well, but I don't know that there are. But we go one step at a time.
so I think you should check with them, Peter, and And I guess we ought to send it to Erica and Libby and just see if they want to send it on to town council to think, you know, whether it's not, as long as it's not objectionable to them, they should not have concern with it.
Do you mean town council or select board or both?
We'd have to go to, oh, we'd have to go to select board first, and they'd have to agree.
Yeah.
Erica, they would have to agree that town council ought to opine on it, because they won't know whether it meets the requirements.
Okay, do we need to take a vote or anything, or at this point, just we'll keep,
No, I think we have a consensus that
Yeah. okay.
we can continue pursuing this.
Oh, did I go on?
No,
There.
Okay, I can't see you.
oh, I see, yeah, I see.
See you.
We see you.
Oh, well, that's too bad for you guys, but but all right, anyway, I'll listen in here.
What about the video? Do you hit the little video button on the lower left?
I don't know what happened, but don't worry, I can hear you.
Okay, the stop
There you
video.
are, you're back.
There
It's
I go.
it's a local problem, yeah.
Okay, so pick up in Verizon here.
Okay, all right, folks. All right, so I think, anybody have any new business to concern themselves with? We should think about when we should start off with our first real meeting, and whether the June 19th meeting is one in which we ought to invite Libby. You know, usually when we start the season, we have an in-person meeting, and Libby might be more available after the election than
Yeah.
before the election. So,
She may have more to talk about.
so Kathy,
Oh, you're talking about an in-person meeting?
Yeah,
Has everybody been vaccinated here?
yes,
Yep.
that would be interesting.
why not? I mean, I assume that there's no prohibition.
Right.
And
I'm not talking about prohibition, I'm talking about safety.
I'm talking about both. I mean, obviously, none of us would do anything that's not safe. But if we all have-
I think that when we are able, when we're comfortable to have our first in-person meeting, and I don't know what the town rules are, because they may not. But so long as there is an emergency order in effect, I think we ought to, even if we have an in-person meeting, we should do a hybrid meeting where people who are not able to attend in person can attend,
Yeah.
virtually, because I have a feeling that members of the committee will have different levels of risk sensitivity. And I think that's entirely reasonable given what we're dealing with.
Yes, just remember though, until you change the law, Peter, we don't have a quorum to prove anything unless unless 5 of us are in the room. So,
Well, what's the governor, doesn't the governor, has the governor's edict expired? No, it's still in effect.
No, it hasn't. I'm saying so long as the governor's emergency order is in effect.
And we- yeah.
But then even after that, we could do
Right.
hybrid meetings, but we would have to have a quorum present, in
yeah,
physical quorum.
we can always meet to have somebody electronically join even without changes, but not.
They won't
for quorum
count, yeah.
purposes,
Yeah.
Not for quorum purposes. Okay. What else? All right, so did we normally, and we think we should start off with asking Libby on June 19th?
Yeah.
Or is that the time that we normally have our first meeting with the, I think so.
Yeah, it's about right. That's about right. That's generally about when we usually start.
Yeah. I think it's before July, so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, okay. And I'll be on island by then for sure.
I have a question. I know they put out a request for, to be reappointed to this committee, and those of us who were expiring sent in our new paperwork. Is there because we have openings that are they're just vacant, does that mean that we could bring on new members if we wanted to? Anytime during the year?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think they
Yeah.
would, they would let that happen, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just didn't know if there was a deadline we were gonna miss.
no, I came in July the first time.
There's a
Okay,
notice going out, the thing that I saw from my other committee, is a notice going out about openings and that people are supposed to notify the town, but those are official committees, those aren't advisory committees.
okay,
So, there's a May deadline or something like that, but it has never applied to us before. And by the way, the other thing that I'm sad about is that we have not been able to attract any additional members. We have a few openings on our committee of people who are here, all summer long that will be able to attend in person. And, I did write that letter to the Inky, which she was nice enough to publish, thanks to Bill Gardner. But it didn't attract any,
Generate any interest, huh?
well, we got interest, but it was people who aren't here
Here.
2 straight months,
I see.
they're here other parts of the year, so.
Yeah,
That's
my
the
only other
problem.
thought, when I get desperate about this, my only other thought was that, we should put an ad. I mean, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money. Put an ad in the Inky that would say the same kind of thing I said in the letter to the editor.
Well, I have somebody in mind. I guess we should just double, who might fit the bill. Another lawyer, another Paul Weiss lawyer out of New York. So we might be able to do some drafting for us or get somebody.
Somebody in mind I invited, but unfortunately he was not able to do it. But I just heard something about his family, and he said, I think they're selling their home down south and they're going to move, and he has a home in Nantucket, and move full-time here. So maybe I'll ask him. Now that he's going to become a full-time resident.
Could someone circulate, maybe Kathy, is there a form? Do we have that form or whatever
Yeah.
it is? Yeah, circulate that to us. So we can send it to the people that might be interested. That'd be great. Thank you.
Is that a form that should be posted on our webpage on the website?
It's on the town's website.
Yeah, Townsend website.
Yeah, it's on the town's website.
Yeah.
I just don't know the link off the top of my
My
head.
only thought is that, what we wrote in that letter, that optimistically saying that, the town, was wise enough to come up with this idea to have the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers so that they could understand the issues of concern and that we have some openings.
I'll tell you what I can do, Gary. I mean, I put out a weekly thing from Nantucket Together. I could put out something that says we're looking. You have to be, you have to be physically present on the island to apply. But if people are interested, and a lot of them are beyond the single issue that we're working, there
Yeah.
might be some people there too.
Yeah, can you also, when you circulate that to us, could you just save us time and circulate the letter, Gary's letter? If we have a copy of the letter,
Yeah,
that would be good, because obviously if we're trying to encourage people,
Okay,
we'll hopefully use that too.
yeah. And if you can't find it, Kathy, I'll try to find it somewhere.
okay.
Okay. All right. So I think we're finished. No new business. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Everybody in favor of adjourning? Yes, thank you. Okay, everybody, do you all have your shots by now?
Absolutely.
We're all
Holy
safe?
cow.
Yep.
Well, I get my second one on Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Okay, good.
Okay, we can meet in person for sure then.
Right. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.